There, there has been a major shift with remote work, both in the request by candidate individuals seeking new employment and companies really coming around the corner in embracing remote work.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but there are more companies than were last year. And they understand casting that wider net of accommodating remote workers is to their benefit.
That's exciting to hear.
Um,
Is it specifically certain roles or across the board?
it is estimating, obviously, with the new programs that are in place that allow that to happen, energy being one. CAD drafting has been good outcome of with remote work. Sales, obviously, and a little bit more of project management.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have back actually my second time guest, Vicki Borkowski. She is CEO of Millwork Recruiting Source. And today we're talking about the talent marketplace, the things she's seeing in the talent marketplace, and a little bit about how the talent marketplace is impacted when millwork shops shut down. So thanks for joining me again, Vicki.
Thank you for having me.
So obviously since we last talked, I don't know, what was that, 4-6 months ago now. But what changes or trends have you seen in the talent marketplace within millwork since then?
There has been a major shift with remote work, both in the request and by candidate, individuals seeking new employment and companies really coming around the corner in embracing remote work.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but there are more companies than were last year. And they understand casting that wider net of accommodating remote workers is to their benefit.
Yeah.
So that's been great.
That's exciting to hear. Is it specifically certain roles or across the board?
It is. Estimating, obviously, with the new programs that are in place that allow that to happen, energy being one. CAD drafting has been good, good outcome of with remote work. Sales, obviously, and a little bit more of project management.
Awesome.
Not a lot, but those are the key positions that I have placed remote people.
Yeah.
More so, like how I said, the start to 24 has shown tremendous success in remote placements.
Are you also seeing more talent come onto the market that's already in remote positions and they're moving to another, like, is that influencing it, that people are being recruited and they're already working remote?
A little bit. I think, the terrible C word, COVID, really influenced people wanting that desire to work remotely. I'm not saying that a lot of people are currently, but they felt satisfied both, professionally and personally during that time. And they don't see why they can't continue doing that. I understand the importance, however, of the communication with, siloed departments. But some companies have implemented processes and techniques of keeping that line of communication going. And I think it's imperative that company leadership shares their successes of how that has worked effectively for them. Because I think that's, when I said not every company is looking to do that, because ownership, leadership are, this is the way we've done it forever and ever. Well, I think you would only benefit your company if you would reach out to these other owners and find out what's working. Why are they able to make it work successfully?
Right.
So,
do you also find that, like, so obviously on the employee side, there's a big push for more remote work. For people that have experienced through COVID or whatever means, the cat's out of the bag at this point. Like, they've experienced it, they've seen it work, and they don't want to go back. But on the employer side, is it more just kind of like, well, if we need talent, we're acquiescing, or are you also seeing more perhaps younger, newer owners coming to you that are more open to different types of engagements, different types of employees?
yeah, I agree with that statement that it's a little bit, younger ownership that is embracing remote work.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then do you feel that that's kind of replacing, because also a big part of placement of employees is relocation is a big factor. A lot of time I would imagine is, hey, I found the right candidate, but they're not where I'm at. We need to move them. Is working remote, negotiation about remote work kind of tied in with that, or just kind of replacing a chunk of that?
Depending upon the role and depending upon the distance between where the candidate currently is and where the company is located, there are other factors to take into consideration.
Yeah. That's interesting. And so, yeah, I had a post, not too long ago about this, at least within engineering, because I have clients constantly that I'm talking to, owners of companies that are saying, hey, if you know of any good engineers, I'd love to hire them. And I also have engineers reaching out saying, hey, I'm looking for a new spot, but only if it's remote. And, it's this odd scenario where I'm like, well, yeah, I know these engineers. Oh, we don't want anybody remote, so we're not interested. And the engineer is saying, well, if it's not a remote opportunity, I'm not interested. Like, there's supply on both sides, but
Yes.
the overlap doesn't seem to align as much as it could.
Yes, there is a big disconnect with the engineering aspect.
Yeah.
CAD drafting, not a problem, for sure.
You find that more specifically in that role?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's
Absolutely.
possibly a personality type as well, that the engineers tend to be introverted, tend to be like more productive. They would rather work alone, right?
Yes.
And so maybe it trends towards the type of person that also really would like to work remote.
I mean, not being interrupted
Yeah.
constantly is, not a problem when you are working remotely. So, and that is really the number one reason why engineers come to me saying this is the reason why I would like to work remotely. I'd be more effective, more efficient.
Do you think that is a significant reason people are losing engineers? Is they're leaving for a remote opportunity?
That is one. I think the other main reason, and I had put out a survey about this, and it wasn't dedicated to one type of title or career, but I think we all know how many hours engineers work. They get burnt out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be reason number one in my experience, in my conversations.
Too many hours.
Yep. Too many hours.
Yeah. And I would say that's,
Or, I think, and so the trade-off in that is if they are working that many hours, but still at home, they would possibly reduce how many hours they'd be working because they're not constantly interrupted.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And gives them that comfort of, okay, I'm here in a more comfortable work setting. And it could be more efficient.
More efficient. There's not the time commute, and probably it wouldn't feel like as many hours as well.
Yeah.
That's an important point. I think that, so one, owners and leaders in millwork shops, if you're struggling with hiring or retaining engineering talent, are your engineers regularly working a significant amount of overtime, which is meaning you're either inefficient and or understaffed, which I think everybody is a little bit of both. So you mentioned that, you put out a survey, so this is something that I'm curious, because I think you're doing more than anybody at trying new strategies with social media and your recruiting processes. I know you've talked about, and I think last time we talked, using ChatGPT and AI. What other kind of innovative strategies are you exploring? Are you finding success in that maybe wasn't, a normal part of the
I think
recruiting process?
not just about posting about the positions that I currently have open,
Mm-hmm.
but keeping people engaged. I mean, what I do is about communication, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a way to stay relevant and engage in people being interested in what I'm sharing is to put out content to engage others, that they find interesting or funny or, relevant to what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's an important factor of what I do now. And I think you share that same
Mm-hmm.
mentality, right? You have to stay in front of people. You have to stay relevant. You have to, express ideas or generate ideas that are of interest, where people do feel engaged and do feel heard.
Yep.
I always want to, uh, motivate others and want others to feel that they can interact. Not everyone wants to interact on my post because they don't want others to know that they may know me, that they're talking to a recruiter, right? And all those surveys are confidential. No one knows who they are except for me, right? But the outcome of those surveys, and I hope hiring managers and company owners look at those surveys and get a glimpse of what people want. How many hours are they working? What's important? I mean, a recent survey about, choices on benefits. As of last night, and you had participated, is people would love to have 100% paid health insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
The close second is remote only work. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't think enough people realize, because a lot of time, and it's hard to gauge, because everybody says, we offer benefits, and they do, but it varies what those benefits are,
It varies.
what amount the company pays, what even they make available to the client, what the 401k match is, all that type of stuff. And so, and obviously it's not easy for smaller companies to justify that expense, but like that is an easy way to offset difference in compensation, so that you
Absolutely.
can justify
It's
it.
a tool.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And depending on the candidate, it might be more important.
Exactly. I mean, PTO is important to some people. If you have a young family, you want, 3-4 weeks of time to spend with their families, especially younger families. Heck, I mean, as the workforce ages, they want to go on vacation. You want to enjoy time away from the office,
Right.
away from the grind. So yeah, that's very important.
So you said top was full paid health insurance, which for anybody listening
Yep.
outside of the US, that is a US audience answering that question. Because that is not something we have here. There are companies who provide it.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and I think
That's a huge benefit.
yeah, especially if you have family, because where I've worked places where it wasn't covered or only partially covered, you pick your plan, and it's individual and spouse, individual and family, and the tiers and the cost to the employee can get significant very fast.
For sure. I will say, on top of that, I would say a majority of my clients that I work with do offer health insurance.
Mm.
Not all of them offer 100% paid health insurance, but they do.
Yep.
Because, I mean, in this day and age, companies that, and when I talk to a potential client that does not offer health insurance, I tell them it's going to be very difficult for you to be competitive, for me to be competitive on your behalf,
Right.
bringing talent to the table.
Yeah. No, for sure.
So
That makes sense.
unless you can, provide a stipend for them to go to the open market,
Yeah.
that's challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think as an employer, like, okay, if you're struggling to find talent to begin with, what caliber of employee are you going to attract? It's going to be the people that aren't going to get that job that offers benefits, that aren't going to be qualified to get, better opportunities. So you're very quickly rapidly narrowing your available talent pool.
Caliber talent, that's exactly right.
Well, shifting gears a little bit into something that I was really interested to get your take on and talk about for the first time. I don't think I've talked with anybody about this. Is uh, something that unfortunately is a constant in our industry is seeing companies go out of business, closing their doors for whatever reason. Sometimes it's through acquisition, sometimes it's through there's no poor performance. There's a lot of reasons, right? But nevertheless, that has a significant ripple effect in our industry, especially on the talent market, because one, as soon as that news goes out to the company, you've got a bunch of people that now enter the talent market looking for roles, and you have other companies that are seeing that as an opportunity to get good talent that otherwise wasn't available, right? It might have been a company that has great retention and was a great company, and then they decided to shut down. Now there's some really good people available. Like, I imagine this is something you've seen and continue to see a lot. What are some of the kind of initial ripples that you see come from that when a big shop closes its doors?
Well, that's a broad question. I mean, on the personal side of it, you know, it causes an influx in people's desire to remain in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I have seen that worry about the industry, but I try to encourage people to set aside the initial shock
Mm-hmm.
and frustration and anger about what has transpired, and let's move forward and work together on a potential opportunity. But yes, it opens up floodgates to certain companies depending upon location, depending upon where that candidate wants to reside. Um, but I guess, and the other thing that I've seen how it can affect negatively with candidates is some of them have had some terrible bad luck being with companies that have closed in a short amount of time, subsequently, one right after the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not me, but some companies will look at that and go, they're job hoppers. Well, did you realize company shut down? They went to another company and closed. And
Yeah.
so there is that. So those are the few things that I'm witnessing.
Well, and I would imagine that some of that is kind of related to a company that closes the doors. Honestly, there's probably signs that it was coming a lot of times, and there may be turmoil internally that leads to it. So there may be kind of leading indicators. One being, hey, they're struggling to keep people. Maybe there's a reason that people who are there and see the signs and worry already leave ahead of time, and so then they hire those
Oh,
job
sure.
hoppers, right?
Absolutely.
Interesting. And obviously a lot of times, yeah, like you said, location is going to be a factor that, the shop employees and a lot of the people that are on site are first going to be going to somewhere that's local more than likely. And do you see that a lot of times where it's kind of like, oh, I'm not surprised. I saw that coming, or I heard through the grapevine, or there's people, like you said, that there's leading indicators to that a lot of times.
Yeah. You made a good point before about, me being contacted by individuals where they're hearing rumblings, they're seeing, initial waves of layoffs in that scenario. Um, a lot of people tell me too, did not see this coming.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you
Mhm.
think, remote work can continue to influence, talent acquisition and retention in the future, like maybe even to prevent future shutdowns. Do you think that is going to just continue to be more and more of a factor?
Uh, yes, absolutely. I mean, to remain competitive, I keep saying that, to cast that wider net, but to remain competitive and relevant. I mean, this is not going away.
Yeah.
Remote work is not going to go away. And the increase in demand for it is just going to increase as time goes on. And I think if some of these companies do not put steps in place to accommodate that, yes, to your point,
Yeah.
they're going to get left in the dust because they're not going to have the manpower to estimate, to do drafting, to engineer, to project manage. Yeah, and it's going to be, they're going to find themselves in a pickle.
Do you find in working with specific companies or candidates who have worked for multiple companies related to remote work that, obviously some companies are more set up and more successful at it than others? Like, are there things that you look for, or that you find of like companies that have been more successful that they do that's different?
Um, yeah, I I do ask the question, how have you been successful? Um, and it comes back to communication. Although they're not in person, they set up procedures, software programs, teams, whatever, and they're consistent.
Mhm.
I think if you keep, communication in certain meetings, have a point to the meeting, address it, and move on, not to have a meeting just to have a meeting. And that's an issue regardless of what industry you're in.
Yeah.
Have a point, be concise, set the expectations. Um, if you set those policies in place and expectations up front, that's great. Implement the software programs, whatever that may be. If it's, not Teams, whatever it is, but set those up.
Right.
If you have to set up a VPN for some other things, I don't know, but there are ways that you can be, effective.
Right. Yeah, I had, and one of maybe 2 weeks ago, I had Justin Birkin on, and he is a remote
Yeah.
engineering manager for
Yep.
Casey Schlegel, and I think he's an example of an engineer who has been very successful at working for multiple companies, remote engineering. He worked with me over at USA Millwork and Mission Bell, and I think that one of his advice and some of the things that he did was, as the employee, um, every time he onboarded with a new company as an engineer that was remote, he went on site. Even if it was for a day or a week, he visited the shop, he went on site, he observed, he talked to the people. And I think that is key for any remote position, is that it's not like that you've never visited the shop, especially if you're going to in a role like engineering where you're directly outputting to that shop. And also he's an effective and intentional communicator. And so I think that a lot of engineers who want to be remote are doing themselves a disservice by not expanding their competencies outside of just the technical stuff. You have to be a better communicator than somebody on site. You have to be better at time management than somebody that's on site. You have to be, anticipate and be better with the technical tools and software than somebody that's on site. And so you effectively have to be an all around better employee and a manager to manage yourself and manage up to be remote. And also understanding that it is more work. A lot of times managers are not equipped themselves. Like a lot of the way they manage is by micromanaging and seeing you in your seat and then coming to you and asking you questions because they don't have the foresight or time or capacity to plan an agenda and have one-on-ones and have a schedule. Right. And so I think understanding that a lot of times from an owner's position that's making that decision is they have to evaluate the rest of their organization. Hey, are we built to support a remote employee? And so one of the things I usually tell companies is, one, especially for engineering and technical roles is the same thing that you should be doing to be capable of onboarding a new person in person is the same thing you need to be able to do remotely. And you have to have processes. You have to be able to communicate and have metrics and ways to measure productivity. And
Yes.
you have to have quality control, right? And so usually companies that struggle to hire and onboard people, period, are also the same ones that just struggle and can't get over the hump of remote.
Yeah, and I agree with that statement. I mean, the companies that are gun shy on having remote workers is because for them very, same fact of they don't have procedures in place of how do we do that? Well, you got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
And
For sure.
usually from my experience, that starting somewhere, that bridge, that's kind of like the gateway to remote is somebody that is an internal employee that moves. You say, well, we already trust them. They already know how to work for us. Now they're just translating
Right.
to remote. And a lot of times that is the best way to figure it out. Because it's, hey, somebody you trust, somebody that knows your company, and now they're just shifting out of office. A lot of times that's the easiest way to start. And if you can do that first, then it becomes easier to hire somebody straight off the street and to be remote.
I agree. I agree.
Going back a little bit though to companies as people find themselves unexpectedly on the marketplace through no doings of their own, companies shut down or what have you. What advice do you have for them? Even like you mentioned, they may look like a job hopper, but they've just had a series of unfortunate companies they found themselves in. What advice do you have to them if they might find themselves in that position?
Number one, contact the industry recruiter. We have the finger on the pulse, and talk to them. And I think it helps to reassure what they are going to be doing next. The conversation can be very broad, but I would absolutely start with a industry recruiter, number one. Number two would be they need to market themselves. They have to be their advocate for themselves, whether it be on LinkedIn, and utilize their connections. Reach out to everyone, announce that they are looking for a new opportunity. Call the other architectural millwork shops that they may have, partnered with. Continue network with your former employees or your former colleagues. Network, and market yourself. Even other social media sites, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, but LinkedIn is the primary. And update your resume. I always tell people when you are writing a resume, let's focus on your accomplishments, not on your tasks. We know what a project manager does. Tell me your story of how you landed, what successful big project have you worked on most recently? How did you save the company money? Talk about those kind of successes. So when a hiring manager or a recruiter looks at your resume, they're thoroughly impressed of what you've been able to accomplish. Focus on that. What else? Those are the three main points I would do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Definitely LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've gotten just by being active on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of people maybe are hesitant or don't think about it until they need a new job and then it's scrambling. But it can be invaluable to already be on there, already be active and already be current. And like you said, having a pulse on things. Something else I want to maybe, for people that don't know, because if employees out there haven't worked with a recruiter, or maybe they've worked for a company or an employer who thinks poorly about recruiters, does it cost an employee anything to be placed and work with a recruiter?
That's a fantastic question. No, it does not. And if they ever speak to a recruiter that would want to charge them money, I always tell them, hang up the phone, disconnect and run.
Yep.
No.
No, so
All reputable recruiters are paid by their clients.
right. Only if they're placed and only if they're placed successfully.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's something that not everybody might know. I didn't know when I first started getting calls early in my career from recruiters. I was always apprehensive, like, well, how are you getting paid? Like, what am I going to have to give you for this? Right. But if you are looking for a job, or even if you're not, but a recruiter reaches out to you, it's worth a conversation and talking to them. There's no harm in finding out and hearing somebody out.
Right.
And two, again, your job as a recruiter, is at stake if you were not holding confidentiality on both sides. So,
Correct.
I think that's another thing that's important. And you can see, again, if you're active on LinkedIn, who are the credible recruiters.
For sure. No, and timing is everything in what I do. So to your point, it can't hurt to have a conversation today, because next year your life may be very different.
Yep.
And there may be something that you had said that will trigger my memory. My husband always says, "You have the greatest memory. I don't know how you remember the things you remember."
Yep.
But and then you're also in my database, so you'll get emails from me about opportunities, and so it can't hurt. You never know what may develop from the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. A new opportunity might come up that they're a great fit for 6 months from now.
Yep. Absolutely.
No, I think that's huge. And I think not enough people know how it really works.
Yep.
And yes, your advice, I think, definitely about updating the resume, and what I would say is have somebody that knows you well, like your spouse, your significant other, your best friend, read it. Because I know a lot of times when you're writing a resume about yourself, you feel like, I don't have any accomplishments to put on here. And if I talk to my wife, my best friend, whoever, they're going to say, hey, didn't you do this project? You've been telling me all about it. Put that on there. Hey, don't remember you were on this committee or you helped with this. A lot of times that will shake you to put things that you maybe, if you're like me, you don't like talking about yourself. You don't like talking about your accomplishments. And a lot of times you downplay your own accomplishments. So getting that second, third party advice and just reading it and being like, you should talk about this. You've done this. Because that's how a recruiter, that's how an employer is going to read it.
It's a great point.
And there are people, like recruiters that will review and help you with that, but also there's resume writers. I remember one time I found somebody on Fiverr for like $200 that helped me cater my resume specifically towards a role that I was trying to apply for. So there's tons of resources that are very accessible these days, more than ever.
Yeah, I'll have a couple of recommendations of resume writers. I don't write resumes.
Yeah.
I can go over suggestions on how to improve a few things, but I don't write them.
Read a lot of them.
Yes.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, last time we talked, this will be the first time I'm doing this a second time, ask you 2 questions. And I'm interested to see if these change or what your thoughts are now. But the first, what do you see changing in the millwork industry over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly around talent acquisition and retention?
I don't know if you'll agree with this. And there's a lot of manufacturing is concerned, but I see the continuing evolvement in technology, quite honestly, which opens maybe the door to a wider net of candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think SolidWorks and Inventor and a few other programs, and there's development in other programs that you may be aware of that I've heard rumblings about, that not a lot of people have experience with. Well, now's the time to learn it. And so bring people that may have the technical acumen and have the right personality and are the right culture fit for the organization can open the door to training new people and leading to new people within the industry. And, one of the surveys I had put out there is also about sustainability. Um, I think that's a focus in the woodworking industry, which also implements, a different set of skills. And then obviously the industry, you know, you have an older working force. There's going to be a lot of retirees.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of retirees right now.
Yeah.
I'm getting calls all the time. So and so is retiring at the end of this year. So and so is retiring in 6 months. So there's going to be a major skill gap. And so the industry has to continue to focus generating interest in the industry.
Yeah. No, I
And
think that's interesting what you said about broadening with technology, opening up opportunities to a wider talent pool. Because I think definitely as our manufacturing and millwork becomes more automated and more like other manufacturing, then you can leverage, hey, my design engineer, I could hire somebody from this adjacent manufacturing industry that before was too different. They use a similar software, operate a simpler machine for a metal shop, and now they can operate that type of machine for us, for example.
I agree with that.
Well, on the flip side of that, what do you see remaining the same despite these changes?
Um, Traditional, the woodshop guys, the artisans that will remain, um, cabinet makers, the labor workers that need hands-on cabinet makers, woodworkers. I think that will remain the same. Um, Project management will, I think, always remain the same. The requirements, the knowledge, but I think that's going to evolve too, because like how I said, the workforce is aging, and so ideally, clients want somebody that have a strong technical. They know how the product is built,
Mm-hmm.
so they can have that conversation. But now it'll switch in the next 10 years, and you're going to have to start educating people that technical aspect that may have the personalities and the drive in project management, proficiency in working with clients, but now they will have to be taught about the industry.
Yeah. So a little bit of that dynamic that's shifting. We're still going to need those people that have that technical knowledge on how the products are built. I had Chris Werneman on last week, and he's a youngin in this industry. He came up from Pitt State and is now in a master's program about adult learning. But he had an interesting statement he made about what's going to change. And basically, he said that who in your organization needs to know certain information is changing, meaning that, in the past or today, the guy at your bench needed to understand how wood grain affects how it's cut on the saw, or certain information about the nature of the product, the material, and that information is needing to shift upstream to the guy programming the saw, the guy programming the CNC. And so now it's the same information is still important and still has to be understood by somebody in your organization, but that knowledge is shifting upstream into different roles of who actually needs to know that and when in the project lifecycle.
Cool.
Well, as always, I really enjoy having you on, and every time we get to check in, and I hope this continues to be a mainstay that we can check in and get a pulse from you on the talent and what's happening in the marketplace that you're seeing. If anybody's interested in reaching out and finding out more about Millwork Recruiting Source, getting your help for placement or job opportunities, how can they do that?
You can call me always at 262-977-3152. Always, you can find me on LinkedIn, or visit our website at millworkrecruitingsource.com.
Awesome. We will link all those in the show notes for anybody listening to make it easy for you. I'll also include a link to the last time we had you on, and then hopefully in the future somebody may be listening to this coming back from your next visit on Millwork podcast. So
I've been honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.